for the 2014 time period. Anne Marie?
Thank you. So we have with us Peter Rodriguez, who is with Cullen Danowski. He's a partner with Cullen Danowski, and he will take us through some of our financials.
Okay, so we'll get started, but has Anne Marie filled in on the problems that she had this year with the actuary?
No,
No.
I just filled in Mrs.
All right, well,
Fallon.
we should talk about
Yeah.
that, because, I don't have with me today the full financial statements.
Do you
You
want to
know,
show my hand? Yes, sure.
You record your, the OPEB obligation.
Yeah.
Every 2 years, you're required by the GASB to get a full valuation done. Okay, so for the 14-15 year, you needed a full valuation. And for whatever reason, the actuary dragged their heels on it, couldn't get the work done, and we didn't get the report until last Friday. So that precluded us from, preparing the full financial statements at this point in time, because only a couple of days ago.
Peter, I just want the board to understand it has absolutely nothing to do with the districts involved.
No, it was,
District
well,
did
my understanding
everything
was all with the
correctly.
actuary. They had
Correct.
trouble working, for whatever reason, they had trouble working with the database that this district needed, which was the same database
We've
format
always that.
they've done for the last, this will be your fourth full valuation. So, for whatever reason, didn't come forward. I know Amy was calling them. They were having problems. They made some promises. They broke the promises. Did you end up going to a different actuary? Is that what?
No, they completed it, but the BOCES got out of the middle,
Okay.
and I went right to the actuary. I
Okay.
identified what the issues were, and then the actuary was able to get the work done in
Okay.
about 36 hours.
So we got the report last Friday, we did the conversion, the statements are gonna, they're working on the statements right now, but we still have to do the, go through the engineer, we still have to have management review everything. So we don't have the GASB 34 financial statements today, the full accrual basis. What we did have, because we finished the audit, we have the fund financial statements, which is the more important part of the document in any event. And we have it's about a 65-page document now. It's expanding every year with new GASBs and things. And the fund piece of it is probably about 6 pages, which is the important part. So what I was able to do is I'm going to start with, I prepared a spreadsheet. It may not be in the exact order that I'm going to go. But we'll start with a spreadsheet, because this spreadsheet is the analysis of your fund balance in your general fund. This is what you use to plan. Should be right behind the manager letter.
It's the one that has no number on it.
Right. Okay, so, this is an analysis of your fund balance, starting with, we were at July 1st, 2014, we ended up. So your total column, you see the total column, you started with $41.5 million, your revenues were 224, your expenses were 223 and change, so that brought you down to 42.2. So you had a $656,000 operating surplus this year. Revenues exceeded expenditures. That's what adds to your fund balance. Okay, you can see that's the only change in your total fund balance. Now you have all the different buckets and the activity that moved it from one bucket to the next, your reserves. So you're going from left to right. You start with your encumbrances. They went down from 604 down to 417. So you had less POs at the end of the year. So you need less fund balance to cover those purchase orders. So you set aside 417 for the open purchase orders. Workers' comp, what I'm going to do, rather than going across, I want to go down the list, because it's important to go down, it's a little bit more meaningful. Okay, so we adjusted your encumbrances to reflect less purchase orders, and you adjusted your appropriated fund balance, which is all the way to the right. Last year, you appropriated back to the taxpayer $6.4 million, I'm using round numbers, $6.4 million. This year is $4.6 million. So that's a reduction of that of the 1.8. So that goes back into fund balance. Then you have the reserve activity, appropriated reserves. You can see going across 350 in unemployment, 1.3 in the employee benefit and the retirement contribution. That's what you used in your budgeting process rolling over into the 14-15 years. So you use those are the reserves you use to fund your 14-15 budget. So between the fund balance at the beginning of the year, 6.46, the appropriated fund balance, and those reserves, you used $10.7 million to fund your 2014-15 budget. Okay, the next line is unused reserves. So what ended up happening with the employee benefit reserve is you budgeted to use $1.3 million, but your actual expenses for compensated absence upon termination was only $463. So you can't use that extra money for other expenses, so it gets returned to the reserve. Okay, so that's why you see the $836,000 being returned to the reserve. If you had spent $101.3 million, then there'd be nothing returned. Okay, because those reserves have to be used for the expenditures that, that they were set aside for. Okay, so we return the $836 to the reserve. There's some interest that's allocated, this money is invested, you're earning some interest, as minimal as it is, you're still earning, so the interest gets allocated to the reserves. And then at the end of the year, the board had some resolutions to put money back into the reserves, to replenish the reserves. You took out the 4.2, but you put back in 5.9. So you replenish the reserves and you see your balances at the end of the year. So your balances, changed slightly. Again, your total equity only changed by $656,000. It's all different pieces. You're at the 4% for the unassigned fund balance, which is where you want to be. Okay, 4% of the 2015-16 budget. And if you look at the little grid at the bottom of the page on the right-hand side, it's just another way to reconcile, the unassigned fund balance. You start the year with the $9.3 million. We'll look at schedules later that show the variances. You collected $444,000 more than you budgeted on the revenue side, and you didn't spend $11.1 million on the expenditure side. So that's your operating surplus. That's your surplus for the year. That's what you generated from a budget. You generated about $11.5 million from the budget, and then down below is what you did with it. You took some of that and you put it into the reserves for the interest, returned it to the E-block. Board approved $5.9 million going into the reserves, and then you appropriate it back to the taxpayers, and for the 15-16 year, the $4.6 million, leaving you with the 9.5, which is 4%. Okay, so that's the results of the general fund. Okay, anybody have a question on that? Again, you've seen the financial statements before, you've seen how convoluted they get with the GASB 34. They're compounded this year with the pension GASBs. We're recording a piece of the TRS asset on your books. TRS is all funded, so statewide actuaries ordered that plan, and they said something to the effect of your share of the overfunding is like $60 million. That's now on the statement. So they're getting more complicated, but this is what you really need to know for your planning. Where you stand with your fund balance, with your 4%, with your reserves. That's how you get through it.
If I can just point out for the board members on the committee, the $4.6 million that we've appropriated, which is kind of toward the bottom of that line that Peter just referenced, that was the planned reduction in the appropriated fund balance that we spoke about during the budget season. As you know from the controller's audits, he has been criticizing districts for using that surplus money to reduce the budgets going forward. So while that was always the intent of the money, use it as an offset to raising taxes, now that's being criticized, so we're trying to get ahead of that to plan to reduce that. So we had committed to doing that, and we were able to do that as part of the reconciliation of this year's budget, or 14-15 budget, which was really a good thing. We were able to commit to and execute against what we had planned for.
Okay, so I prepared this because the fund balance is key to your, to your plan, knowing where you stand financially. There's a packet that's put together. It's 4 pages. It's probably stapled together. It's the balance. It's the 4 statements in the financial. 2 financial statements that affect your funds, and then 2 supplemental steps that affect the general fund. Okay, these have page numbers on it, so I'm going to go to page 18 first. So this statement is the statement of revenue, expenditures, and change in fund balance. It's your operations for the year. It's the revenues. Again, you use 5 different funds. Okay, they're all listed across. It's the revenues for each fund, the expenditures for each fund, and it works down to the change in the in fund balance or the profit or loss. It's the same thing. So if you look at your general fund, your operating revenues, most of it being property taxes, obviously, and STAR, for $224 million. Okay, go through the expenses. These are your operating expenses for $210. So before transfers to other funds, you had a $13.5 million surplus, but you pay your debt service in your debt service fund, so there's a large transfer going out, $12 million. And that goes into, that $12 million, $12.8 million goes into a couple different places. It goes to the special aid fund. The general fund has to pick up a share of the summer handicap cost, and also the 4201, which is the deaf and blind kids. There's a contribution on the part of the district to the state doesn't reimburse 100% on those two programs. So you transfer in $632,000 to cover your share of those two programs. You transferred $10,417,000 into the debt service fund, which was to pay the principal and interest on the bonds. So you can look above there and you see the same numbers for the expenditures, so you transfer the money and pay for the expenses. And you transfer $1,830,000 into the capital fund for some capital projects. So at the bottom line then, for the three lines on the general fund, there's your $656,000, that's your operating surplus, which is on your list. Okay, gives you details. Special aid fund, you'll notice at the bottom there's no fund balance, okay, because you don't build any equity in the special aid fund. That's where you count your federal and state grants. Okay, all the federal grants are reimbursed dollar for dollar based on what you expend. So as you spend the money, you earn the money, so there's no fund, there's no profit, if you will. And on the state programs where you have to pay for a portion of it, you put the money in, so special aid doesn't build up any equity. You don't build up fund balance in the special aid fund. So you have a $1 million, you know, your handicap grant says $1 million. I know it's more than that. You spend $1 million, you get $1 million. You spend $1.1 million, you get $1 million because that's your budget. But you know, you don't overspend your grant. So no fund balance in special aid. School lunch worked through to the loss was bigger this year. It was $151,000 loss this year compared to $7,000 loss in the prior year. So looking at that, it's really mostly in your sales. Your sales of school lunch, the sales in schools went down about $230,000.
That's a change in the.
What,
in
yeah,
the
that's,
mix.
I was just gonna say, that's the
So
minimum.
that was a big hit there. Expenses went down also about $46,000. So the net change, and you had about $160,000 swing in the operations, but most of it's in the sales.
Yes.
Okay, debt service, again, you can see you earned $187 of interest, and that's the profit for the period, going down to the bottom, because the expenses were offset, $10,417,000 was offset by the interfund transfer going into the general fund. So you just pay your bond principal and interest out of your debt service fund. You transfer the money in, pay the debt. Shouldn't be no accumulation there other than the interest, which is what happened. So that $814,000 at the bottom is technically another reserve. It's money that's been put aside from maybe unspent bond proceeds from some of the, the older bond projects, or interest that's been earned on those bond proceeds going back years. That can be used to offset principal and interest down the road. So it's a reserve that's not recorded in the general fund. Okay, and capital, there was some activity, again, you transferred the $1,830,000 into the capital fund, and then the capital expenditures for the year on the ongoing project were $1,468,000. So you see the $1,468,000. There was also $2,089 of money that was, the projects were finished from an old project, so it moved back to the general fund. And you see that going back to the general fund. So there will be a schedule in the final report that shows what capital projects are in process. It'll tie out the $1,468,000. You'll see each project that was the money was spent on, and it'll tie out to the fund balance of $1,422,000. So you'll see that in the full report. Okay, and so that's the operations. Page 16 is the balance sheet. Doesn't really, it tells you something. Basically, the balance sheet on page 16. That's just your assets minus your liabilities equals your fund balance. So, the fund balance, so you can see your assets in the general fund are $89 million, most of that being cash. Okay, the cash is broken out between unrestricted and restricted. This is what the control is looking for. The restricted cash, you don't have it segregated on your books, which is fine, but the restricted cash for financing purposes relates to the reserves that you have in the general fund. It's restricted for expenditure for this particular purpose. So your retirement contribution reserve can only be used for the ERS expense. But it's not restricted that you can't use it for cash flow purposes. Districts are still cutting down their tan borrowing by using that money for cash flow. The restriction on the type of expenditure. Not that it can't be used for cash flow purposes, but on the type of expenditure that can be offset against it. So you have $28 million that can only be spent on those 5 or 6 reserves, that type of expenditure. We break that out on the financial statements. You have liabilities of $45 million. So net comes down to the $42 million of fund balance, which we saw on the schedule. And these are the reserve balances, which again, all were on part of that schedule that we looked at the beginning. Okay? And everything else is, the same thing, it's just your assets. You can see the makeup of your assets. No major change in your assets. you know, from one year to the next, the liabilities and the fund balance. So the balance sheet, you know, it just ties back to the profit and loss, and it ties back to your equity. I have $1 million of assets and $200,000 of liabilities, my equity is $800,000. That's how these two statements interact with each other. The other two schedules I prepared have to do with the general fund only. They are the, you know, actual revenues compared to budget and the actual expenditures compared to budget. So if you look at page 43 first, you'll see the, you can see the variances between, you know, what the final budget and the actual expenses were. You know, you had some budget revisions during the year, you received some donations, there was additional state aid, and maybe board grants or something, I saw 40,000. So, you know, in your original budget, those aren't included because that was part of the budget process that you had back in May of 2014. And then some additional monies came in through donations, additional state aid that the board accepted, and you know, increased the budget for those new sources of revenue. So you can see the 444 is what was collected in addition to, or in addition to the, in excess, I should say, in excess of the budgeted amount. The final budget for revenues was $223,667. Okay, that's before, you know, that's the actual before using fund balance, and you collected $224,111. So that's the 444, and that feeds back to the schedule that I presented in the beginning. That's your revenue variance. So when you collect 444 more than you budgeted, that's an operating, that adds to your surplus in the current year. Okay? On the expense side, it's broken down here. Again, you can see the different breakdowns. General support, in total, you didn't spend $1.2 million out of the $20 million. And you go down, there's your $11,116,000. And it's broken down into the various, these are the requirements that the state education requires you to report on, general support instruction, and then one line is for basically the rest of the expenses. Okay, and this ties back to how the ST3 is formatted and things of that nature. So this variance again goes back to the schedule that I prepared. All we really needed was a schedule that I prepared.
No, I appreciate the, no, I appreciate.
But the schedule shows it all, but these are the statements that are affected, that are going to affect the general, you know, the funds, I should say. I should just say general fund, all the funds, the funds. There's some footnote disclosures that you'll see that will support some of the numbers here. You know, due from federal and state, what makes that up, excess course, general aid, whatever it might be. You'll see that in the footnotes, but that's coming forth.
Right.
Okay? Okay,
You had
so,
mentioned some districts utilize the reserve balances for cash flow purposes, which is what we do. And what that does do for us is exactly what Peter mentioned, which is enable us to borrow less in our TAN than we otherwise would need to. Not every district does that, and they end up borrowing a little bit more than what they need. So we do include it, and therefore we're able to borrow less, which means less of an expense for us.
yeah, I haven't seen the control now with anything that says you can't use it for cash flow purposes. We've seen all the orders that are coming out. None of them are addressing, you know, you're using your reserves to fund your cash flow. They're all coming out with too much fund balance, you're not spending enough of your budget. You know, that's the theme out there. So we haven't seen anything, there's no real guidance on it.
Bond counsel has
said to
definitively
use it.
said it's okay, so we've continued to
Some
come.
bond counsel, others say.
Yeah, our
you know,
bond counsel has
right,
said it's
so-
okay, so.
But
we're
until
going
the
with that.
controller comes out with something, and he's looking at a lot of districts, and all the districts have reserves, and most of them use it for the cash flow. It hasn't been criticized, so I'm thinking it's fine. And why borrow more if you don't have to?
Right.
You know?
Right.
Exactly. So, so that's all I have really for the financial statements for you today. Okay, the rest of the stuff, like I said, you know, the other financial statement, you had two financial statements. You're the only type of entity, government, that I know of that has two different financial statements all packed into one financial. Modified accrual, everything we just looked at is based on the modified accrual basis of accounting. And that doesn't recognize any long-term assets and long-term liabilities, just what's current. Okay, so when you look at the liabilities in, on page 16 for the general fund, you know, you look at things like accounts payable. You know, these are payments to vendors that are going to take place probably in July and August, you know, in a very short term. Accrued liabilities, probably salaries that are being paid in July for timesheets that were worked in June. Your amount, well, due to other funds, your amount for teachers' retirement is the contribution they're gonna make in September, October, you know, they're gonna take it out of the state aid. These are all current liabilities. When you get to the GASB 34 financial statement, now you're looking at other long-term liabilities, which is your long-term liability for compensated absences, the sick day bank that you have for your employees, that's not due for a number of years as they retire. You have the OPEB obligation, which is the post-employment benefits, that's not, you know, that comes due as people retire, and you start budgeting for their, you know, for their health insurance once they retire. Now you have liabilities for the ERS system long-term, it has to do with the underfunding of the ERS system, and you got a big, huge asset for TRS because they're overfunded. So that statement's becoming more and more convoluted, trying to understand how you build it into your plan. You'll get a chance to look at it, and we can, you know, we can discuss that once you see the final director of the financial statements. Okay, so that's the funds. The other thing I wanted to go over with you today was the management letter. Okay, you know, as part of the audit, we issue a management letter each year on anything that we feel we can recommend to improve operating efficiencies or whatever it might be. It starts on page 2 with status of the prior year comments. Okay, and last year you had, you know, 5 or 6 comments. First 4 have been completed. The accounts payable process went very well this year. There was, you know, accounts payable you sometimes have to estimate. You know, you have to estimate, because you may not have the actual bills in, happens a lot with tuition, happens with utilities. So, you know, the way you handle utilities, as an example, is you set up a blanket purchase order at the beginning of the year for electric. And you get down to the end of the year in June, and you've paid through May, and there's still $200,000 on that PO. That's not a good payable. You have to estimate what the June bill's gonna be. You may have it in the middle of July, or you may just estimate, but you know, based on history, your payment might be $25,000, so you have to liquidate that excess PO, and then only accrue the balance. Well, that was corrected this year. Last year we had, in 13-14, there was, things were rolled over that were, the estimate wasn't good. That was all correct this year. The accounts payable process went very smooth, so we've considered it to be corrected.
Wasn't some of the utilities, wasn't that reflected in the other audit that was done? Where we compared with other school districts?
The
that had
efficiency.
The efficiency,
Piece of it.
the energy efficiency,
Different
project.
conclusion, we had overestimated, it actually came in much less.
and we were the ones that, weren't our numbers significantly lower than the other school districts? We saved more
Yeah.
money is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
It's
That
correlated, yeah, it's
Yeah,
correlated
so
on
we
the
saved
direct
more money than
nexus.
than
Yep.
any of the others who had energy performance contracts.
Yes, from the EPC
Significantly,
audit, yes.
yes, from that audit, the numbers, so that's why we had more left in there, because if you anticipate, as they did, then on that,
Well,
those monies
that's
would have been
why you have more
spent,
left in
but
the
we
purchase
did,
order,
we
sure.
had,
Yes.
That was
Exactly.
part of the
Right,
basis for the
And we actually
estimate.
just
Mhm.
received correspondence regarding the
Okay.
the performance efficiency.
yeah, the
We
report
just
came in.
it just came.
Right, so this has to do with recording payables at year end, and sometimes you have to just close your books and you can't wait till November, December for a bill to come, especially if it's tuition, so you make an estimate. As long as it's a decent estimate, and, you know, it has some bearing, you know, to the prior years, that makes sense. So the accounts payable was corrected. We had a recommendation, and there was a journal entries were not being reviewed timely, that you put a procedure into place. Now these, the journal entries are being reviewed on a regular basis by management, so we consider that actually by Emory. So we consider that to be corrected. There was an odd situation with the STAR, 14. I'm not, the town of Hempstead changed the, was it town of Hempstead?
Huntington.
I'm sorry, town of Huntington changed did something with the assessment, and the STAR got mixed up, and you eventually got the extra STAR
Yes.
payment. But it wasn't realized till after the year end close, so we recommend you review and make sure that those estimates, those budgets that you're using work, you know, come in properly, and that was all corrected this year. So that's positive. Driver's ed, you weren't budgeting for the driver's ed program, you were just, you know, as the expenses came in, you were revising the budget. We recommend that it be part of your operating budget, and you did that moving forward. So you budgeted the expenses and the revenues as part of your operations. Okay, so that's been corrected. Extra classroom, it has been problematic for a number of years. You know, I got all these bullet points, I despise this as an auditor, but it's a tough area. You know, you're now using dual signatures, you know, there was a lot of times the central treasurers at these districts have the ability to maintain the books, do the bank recs and sign the checks. You know, no real segregation of duties. Now with the dual signatures on it, that helps out. Two people signing the check, it's a control, so that worked out good. There's a bunch of things that are unchanged, you know, they should be able to correct some of these, interest not allocated to the clubs, you know, you do earn an interest as minimal as it is, it should be allocated here into the clubs. I think you have a club called interest. No, so, you know, we want that allocated, that should be able to give that to the central treasurer. They prepare a report for you at the end of the year, you know, that they do, they do a monthly report?
Yes.
Monthly or quarterly?
They do a monthly, but then they do an annual report. So I'm not suggesting that they allocate the interest every month, because the interest might be, you know, $6. But at the end of the year, when in doing the annual report, they should zero out the interest and allocate it to clubs either by their ending balance.
Individual clubs?
Yeah, the interest goes to the clubs.
Yeah.
Now, on a spreadsheet, it takes about, I don't know, 10 seconds. You know, you
Yeah,
set up
it's
the
just-
spreadsheet, right? And I think the reports they're giving you are based on Excel. They're using Excel probably
They all
for
use
it.
different programs.
Yeah.
Okay.
One use Quicken, one use QuickBooks, one use Excel.
Okay, so they gotta
So
figure it
my
out.
question is like, what's the challenge here? What can we do?
We don't
to
control it,
streamline-
my office doesn't control it, that's the challenge.
So what can we put in place
I
at the
have,
building?
yep, so I have training that I've done every year. I actually created a resource manual for them indicating all the best practices that I had created at a prior district and continued to add to it here. That's distributed to every central treasurer and every club advisor every year
In every building?
in every building. And I also provided last year the specific comments that Cullen and Danowski had provided to us, and I communicated that to the building central treasurers as well. So other than doing it ourselves, this will probably remain as an audit comment as it did, you know, in my prior district and as it does, I believe, in every district.
I think that's the important piece.
Well, it does.
It's,
This
you
is,
know, Half Hollow Hills is not different. It's probably even more established and appropriate practice in place.
We have, I'm gonna guess we do, you know, like 50 external audits. I would think there's some form of extracurricular activity comment in probably 40 of them, 45.
Right.
You have some smaller districts, you have some districts that comply, that have a little bit better, maybe they have less clubs, much more, it's much smaller, so it's easier to control. They just have a middle school, you know, they have 15 clubs at the high school and 10 at the middle school. You don't have, they have a lot more clubs. So the more clubs, you know, getting the kids to stay involved, getting the kids to sign off, because it's the kids' money. They need to sign off on the transactions, if you will. You know, approve the payment orders and say, yes, these invoices are good, pay these. Sometimes there's breakdown during the year. Again, we do a small sample, and we find these things in our small sample, so if you extrapolate it to the population, there's a lot of, you know, kids aren't signed up. The kids lose interest, I think, at a certain time.
Absolutely.
In other places, does the individual club advisor manage the funds? You know, for
What
the
you-
individual
well,
clubs?
What you have is, here's what you really have, with the extra question, you have board oversight, that's one thing. And then you have you know, you have the central treasurers that you appoint for each, you know, location. They're the ones who write the checks and maintain the books. Then you have the faculty advisors that are at the club level, and I believe that a lot of times the building principals are involved with this also.
So,
Okay, you know, that's, so those are the people that are involved, but you have, you know, the whole setup with the state is, you know, is a little bit convoluted, if you will, because they want to teach the kids how to be in business. They want to teach the kids how to, you know, collect sales tax and pay sales tax and run it like it's a business, and it doesn't happen that way. Kids order supplies, and the vendors just believe that it's part of the school district, so they don't charge the tax. The kids don't go back to the way saying, I gotta pay the tax, which you're supposed to pay when you buy something, because it's a business. The whole thing is, you know, the important part with it is a couple things you could correct here. Certainly you can get the interest allocated and get that account down and get it into the clubs. That can be done. That's easy enough. You have clubs with no activity. When I provide you with the extracurricular activity report, you'll see clubs that have a beginning balance and an ending balance with no activity. So what you might want to do now is, you know, to determine if these clubs are active, is what I've done with other districts is you've taken that report, and it has all the different clubs listed down, and you get rid of all the numbers and you make it a sign-in sheet. And you give it to the high school principal, and they go around and you want to get signatures from student president, student treasurer, and faculty advisor. If that comes back and you see there's 5 or 6 clubs with no signatures, they're inactive. close them down now, allocate the balances to the student council, whatever the board policy is, and get rid of them, so next year we don't have that comment. Now's the time to do that, because it's October, the clubs are just starting up, and you might have 5 or 6 or 7 clubs that really don't have a student council and a faculty advisor. Or, even worse, you have a faculty advisor that's getting a stipend and you don't have a club. So, using that, I said, these are the clubs we had, I want to see a couple of signatures of the faculty advisor, student president, and student treasurer. If they have it, you know it's an active club. If they don't, act on it now, you can close those clubs down.
We get club charters that are going to be coming to the board in November, is it? So that
That's another way to
process
do it.
is accomplished through that.
So if there's no club charter coming to the board, and you have a report that shows that there was a club there last year with funds in it, make the determination now and have the central treasurers allocate it to either all the clubs or to the student council, whatever it might be, and close them down, so next year you don't see those inactive clubs. They'll still have an opening balance, but you'll see a transfer of disbursement that closes it down to zero.
Thank you.
So you can certainly take care of that. You can enforce with the central treasurers that you need the kids to sign off on these things. You know, it's pain in the neck, you know, they're trying to get the paperwork done. Faculty advisor, the kids are no longer interested. Faculty advisor has some bills that are coming in, wants to get them paid, but try and get the students to involve, you know, to do that. And then some of the stuff we found during the current year were isolated situations. We bring it to your attention, they'll probably be cleared up next year. You know, misposting in the books, one club, it was posted to the wrong club in the books, where, you know, the art club turns over, $200, and it gets posted to, I like to use the Spanish club. Okay, so, you know, you do the best you can, you enforce the training, you try and get it out there, try and clean up some of the minimal ones that you can get rid of, and you move forward. And the last comment from the year before, which we think is still unchanged, is the due funds. You know, you have activity between the funds that either loans or transactions that are recorded with journal entries. I want to go back to page 16. You know, I'll just look at, well, let's look at due from other funds. Okay, that's the fourth or fifth line down. General fund, 28,000. So there's a $28,000 receivable in the general fund, 3.6, 1 million, 17 million. These can be consolidated. If you look at the payables, the general fund owes 23 million. So you have due funds that I think should be, first should be consolidated. There's no reason in the debt service fund to show a $17 million receivable and a $16.8 million payable. They have to be, journals have to be made, or cash has to be transferred to clean these things up. And that's what we're recommending on that comment. Get those things cleaned up a little bit, because they just continue to grow. And it's a $28 million receivable in the general fund and a $23 million payable. It really comes down to a $5 million receivable. So, isolate it, figure out which funds are what. A lot of it can be done with journal entries, because you just have receivables and payables for the same funds. So Debbie, you can work on that. We think you should clean it up and make it a little more, readable, because, $28 million is really not owed to the general fund. But there's a $23 million payable going out. I would net those out. I like to see each fund have either a receivable or a payable. And each fund you have here has both receivables and payables. So, I would work on that. Okay, and for the current period, we only have one recommendation. It has to do with the payroll rollover process. We do testing every year on the payroll, and what we found this year was one of your contracts, I think it's for paraprofessionals. Paraprofessionals are hired all throughout the year, and one of the stipulations of the contract is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong with the date, if you're hired after February 28th or March 1st, whichever one it is, when June 30th comes and you go to the next year, you don't get a step increase.
Correct.
You're hired prior to that date,
Correct.
you get a step increase. You have a bunch of paraprofessionals where some get step increases because they're hired prior to March 1st, and other ones who are hired late in the year don't get the step increase into the next year because they've only been with you for, say, for 3 or 4 months. And we found some discrepancies there where the people who were hired after March were, got the step increase when they shouldn't have. So you gotta watch that rollover. I mean, that's something that's unique to that contract, and it can be easily missed. very immaterial amounts.
That's what I
No,
wanted
and
to
it
get.
states, we have it in the last sentence, it should be noted, that the amounts were very immaterial. I think it was like maybe 40 cents.
Okay, but that's what I would ask as a superintendent, is that 40 cents goes in the report. I don't want someone reading this report and thinking that it's a
Well, we
large
say
amount
that
of,
it
a
should be
large
noted
amount of money
that
for.
that the total dollar value of this movement in step was immaterial to the district. I don't know if each part, I just use 40 cents as a.
That was noted as the average, the 40 cents.
Okay, so we can put something in about if you want to put the average, it's up to you. I mean, we're noting that it's immaterial, but the recommendation is to watch the roll of the process.
Right, but what, from my vantage point, is I'd like to know how many employees that involve, what.
Well, we can't really say, because, we didn't test 100% of the employees. We did a sample, we tested two. There were two that came up in our main sample of 40. And then we expanded slightly and to see if there was more, and there were a few more in there. So I can tell you what we tested. I can't tell you exactly how many employees there was in total, because we didn't test each and every one of them.
Mhm. No, I am, well, you wouldn't have to test each and every one of them, but I could actually go back. I could go back, I could look at all employees hired March 1st and beyond, and I could run a report, so
Okay.
that I would know. I just
Well,
don't,
that could be part of your corrective, so we can
Yeah,
think,
exactly.
and that could be part of your corrective action,
Mhm.
okay?
Yeah, I just don't want, I don't want there to be a belief that there were hundreds of employees.
Well, that's why we said immaterial to the district, it's an immaterial amount.
Right.
Now, your corrective action can quantify that and say that it was limited to 6 employees, whatever it
Correct,
might be.
that's
Because I don't think it was,
right.
you're looking at a whole year worth of hires.
Yeah, it
Yep.
was 7, and I think it
Unless
was
you
about
look-
$3,000
Right.
in total.
That's big.
3,000
Just to scope
in
it,
total.
$3,000.
Okay, great, that's,
And we'll incorporate that into the corrective action plan to scope that.
okay. That's, it's just that
Yeah, it's
that's
pertinent.
important, it is
Mhm.
pertinent.
Right, because otherwise you're left with it could be any amount of money. It could
Correct.
be,
Now, what you could do if you want to, is, and I would do, I could add to this, because we have time, we're still doing the financials, we can add to this management's response if you like.
Yeah, that'd be
Put a
great.
section of management's response right after, and then you can do your response right there. You still have to do a corrective action, it doesn't constitute a corrective action. That has to be sent, but the management's response sometimes is, I want to look at the management letter, I see the comment, I have management's response, it just answers the question right then and there.
Correct, perfect.
Okay, so what I would ask you to do, Annie, is to, I'm gonna say that you should have a management response then for anything that's open, not just
Sure.
that one.
Oh,
Okay,
absolutely.
so you can put a management response for extracurricular activity,
Mhm.
management response for interfund receivables payables, and a management response for the payroll.
And we've actually done that in the past.
Yeah.
I don't know if we did it last year, but we've done that in the past.
So if you do that, you can, you type up the responses, we'll incorporate into this, I'll just provide you a short. That way, it's, if something in the management letter is sensitive,
Sure.
somebody reads it, what'd you do about it? Well, now you can put your response right there. So
Absolutely.
we'll work it that way.
Great.
Okay, good.
Perfect.
Questions? That's all I have to report.
Now, this is a draft copy, the final
Well, this is the draft copy of the management letter.
management.
These are draft copies of those 3 or 4 or 5 financial statements.
Right.
Okay? I think before, once we get the final draft of the entire financial statement, I think I always have to provide that to Anne Marie
Yes.
to review. I should probably provide for the audit committee members for their review also. And then at that point in time, you can go through it, and if you have any questions, we can certainly have a phone conference on it. You can just give me a call. It's gonna be, the rest of the statements is gonna be the MD&A and comparing stuff. It gets very confusing, because we got 2 methods of accounting, so on the general fund, we looked at it already, you have the $656,000 fund. On the government-wide, you may have a $4 million loss.
Right.
Or an $8 million profit because of the pension, I don't know even where it's gonna be. So you got these 2 numbers that, which one is it?
Right.
2 different accounting methods, and that's why you have 2 different net incomes. Hard to read,
It is.
hard to read.
And then we'll have, the plan is to have the audit committee recommend the full report to the board at the November meeting, after you've had an opportunity to review it.
Right, I still want everybody to get a chance to review the report, ask questions, especially Anne Marie has to approve the report, so she needs a week to just go through it and read.
And you will be at the November meeting.
And I will come to, what night is it? November?
Monday night, I think it's the 14th.
Okay, I'm sure I'll check my availability, but we'll make it there one way or another.
Do you need to know when it is?
If you have it, just so I can, I'll go back.
14th is a
16th.
Saturday.
16th.
Yeah, it's not the
16th.
14th.
It is a Monday night.
Yeah, it's
It's
definitely
Monday
Monday
the
night.
16th.
Thank you very much, Peter.
And what I think we should do though, is this, since you're meeting on the 16th, once you get the reports and you look at them, you're happy with the reports and then Mary's done a review of it, I think we should file with the state before the 14th. Okay, the due date on this report is, obviously, the due date was October 15th with a 30-day grace period. The grace period works well, there's no ramifications to the district. Get it in by the 14th, and that's fine. Unofficially, the ramifications are if you don't get it into the state, they'll hold back your December payment of state aid. So they produce a warrant that says, we're gonna pay all these districts, and if you have reports not in by Thanksgiving, they're gonna say, you're off the warrant. But I think you should get it in by the 14th. So that will be based on, once you receive the report, if the audit committee is gonna recommend to the board to accept the report, I think you can go and file it before it's accepted, that's fine.
We will be able to see the report.
Oh, you're gonna see the report probably before the following,
Before Halloween.
yeah, so you'll see the
I
report.
actually may ask them to have a special meeting. We can have
It's
a
up to
special
you,
meeting
you know,
of it, yeah, I
and then-
would
and-
prefer
and
that the
in
whole
past
board,
we've waited,
correct.
But the
Correct.
meeting would usually be the second meeting in October.
Yeah, no, I don't want,
Okay,
I
that's fine.
would prefer not that I want all of the board to see the report and we'll come together and.
Before it's
and
filed.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, perfect, I appreciate
Yeah.
that, that's good. I just asked the question just to get direction.
That's, okay.
Peter, thank you very much.
Okay, very good. Okay, everybody have a nice day.
Thanks.
We'll be in touch. So we'll be in touch, Anne Marie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. And you get the recommend, the management responses to that. Good.
Absolutely.
Okay, how are you? Oh, great. Yep.
Okay.
It's a
All
draft.
right, let me, let me find out.
To Peter by October, we'll have it, the 31st.
Yeah, I think we have, we're gonna want to work on it over the weekend, so sometime, maybe even the end,
You know,
I'm
can I
shooting the end of
ask
next week.